I used to think founding a startup was the noblest, most exhilarating thing a person could do. Not just a job or a career, a mission. It would be my ticket to purpose, autonomy, and if I played my cards right, maybe even wealth. I'd read all the books, 0 to 1, The Lean Startup, Paul Graham's essays, every tweet by Naval. I wasn't naive, or so I thought. I knew it would be hard, I just didn't understand how it would be hard. I thought the struggle would be external. Investors, competition, product market fit. I didn't realize how much of the pain would come from within. From watching yourself become someone you barely recognize. From the slow erosion of relationships, the persistent weight of failure, and the quiet, creeping loneliness of pretending everything's going great when it isn't. The day I quit my job is etched in my memory. The fluorescent office lights, the hum of printers and distant chatter, the humdrum click-clack of keyboards, it all felt suffocating. I sat at my desk, heart pounding, with a resignation letter half-typed, nerves tangled with excitement. The company had been a good safety net, but safe was a cage. I told myself, this is it, no more waiting, I'm going to build something that matters. I had savings set aside, a co-founder I trusted with my life, and what we thought was a killer idea. An AI-powered platform for small business logistics. We called it LogiSmart, a name we dreamed would be on the lips of every warehouse manager from Portland to Pittsburgh. The first week after quitting was electric. I moved into a tiny shared workspace, a converted loft with exposed brick and bad coffee that smelled like burnt ambition. I wore the same ratty hoodie every day, slept sporadically, and fueled myself on protein bars and hope. Every small win, landing our first beta customer, setting up our Stripe payment gateway, pushing the first prototype live, felt like a tiny victory dance inside my chest. I'd never felt so alive, so driven. I stayed up late nights debugging code, dreaming up new features, rehearsing pitches in the mirror. I told everyone I met, baristas, Uber drivers, strangers on the street, about our vision. We were going to democratize supply chains, and the future was ours. When our first investor gave a tentative, "This is interesting, keep me posted," I nearly spilled my coffee in excitement. We celebrated with cheap burritos and instant ramen. It felt like the start of something sacred. An inner circle of creators, risk-takers, visionaries. We were the underdogs with the brightest spark. I told my parents, this is going to be huge. They nodded, though I could see the worry behind their smiles. I told my friends, give me 2 years. And they cheered me on with vague promises of support. The world was wide open and I was certain we'd be the ones to make it through. But reality is a slow leak, not a sudden flood. At first, the setbacks were small. A promising customer who signed a letter of intent went radio silent. Our AWS bills crept higher, eating into the modest funds we had. The sleek user interface I spent weeks perfecting turned out to be confusing and unusable for the very small business owners we wanted to help. A key engineer we hired quit after 2 months saying, "This just isn't what I signed up for." At first, I chalked it all up to growing pains, telling myself, it's part of the journey. I swallowed my doubts, doubled down on late nights, and told myself to keep grinding. But the cracks widened faster than I expected. We had raised a pre-seed round, $350,000, and to outsiders that sounded like plenty. In truth, it disappeared like smoke within a year. Salaries for our tiny team, even though modest, ate up half the runway. Contractors for design and marketing cost a surprising amount. Legal fees for incorporation, patents, and contracts piled up. Software subscriptions, Slack, Notion, Airtable, AWS, various analytics tools, became a forest of monthly charges, each promising to be the backbone of our startup but collectively draining our bank account. We had traction if you squinted, a handful of signups trickling in, but no one stayed. Retention was dismal, churn was high, and our activation funnel looked like a sieve. Investors gave us advice that felt like riddles: improve your unit economics, get better product market fit, build a sales pipeline. I nodded at pitch meetings, but inside, I was drowning in jargon I didn't fully understand. The real unraveling started when I stopped believing in the product. We pivoted more times than I can count, from logistics to inventory tracking, then to embedded analytics, and finally to what our pitch decks called AI-driven B2B workflow automation. I don't think I really understood that last one. It felt like we were just attaching AI to everything because it sounded good to investors. We weren't building what users wanted. We were building what we thought investors wanted. The distinction felt brutal. My co-founder and I began to drift apart, not with big arguments but with constant tension and silent disappointment. He advocated doubling down on chasing an enterprise deal that might bring revenue in 6 months. I argued for scrapping that and returning to our original idea. Both of us knew we didn't have 6 months runway left, yet, we kept pretending. We wore masks of confidence in front of customers and investors, but behind closed doors, our conversations were weighed down with frustration and doubt. We avoided the hard questions. Is this really going to work? Are we just delaying the inevitable? One night, bleary-eyed and caffeine-fueled, I was staring at mixed-panel dashboards at 2 a.m., watching the number of active users fluctuate by single digits. Suddenly, my inbox pinged. An email from an investor I'd been courting for months. I opened it with a flutter of hope. The subject, "Thanks for the update." The message inside was cold and brief. Not a fit for us at this time. No feedback, no encouragement, just a polite rejection. I stared at that email, feeling my chest tighten and my vision blur. For a moment, the room spun. I shut the laptop and sat in the dark, a quiet wave of grief washing over me. Not loud, not dramatic, just a heavy, exhausted surrender. I realized I didn't believe in us anymore. I was terrified. What followed was silence, deafening and complete. Friends stopped asking about the startup. I stopped answering calls. I hid my LinkedIn page, stopped posting updates, stopped pretending. My co-founder took a consulting gig just for a month and never really came back. I was left alone in a tiny office, surrounded by whiteboards full of crossed-out ideas and sticky notes with forgotten dreams. The codebase grew dusty. The website went offline. There was no grand shutdown announcement, no farewell post, no closure, just a slow fade into nothing. It felt like my own failure had become invisible, like a ghost slowly being erased. In the weeks that followed, I wrestled with an identity crisis. I was no longer a founder. I was the guy who failed. Updating my resume felt like admitting defeat. Job postings made me nauseous. Looking for a team player with proven success. I couldn't say I had success. I had a dream that crumbled. Who would want me? I felt hollow and adrift, caught between grief and self-loathing. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake replaying conversations, wondering what I could have done differently, what mistake was fatal. Was it the idea? The team? Me? Slowly, though, something began to shift. In moments of quiet, I found small memories. The bakery owner who wrote me a thank you note, saying our product saved her 3 hours a week. The one customer who gave honest feedback, even when it hurt. The rare bug I fixed after hours that made everything run smoother. I realized I had built something, maybe not world-changing but real, something that touched a few people's lives. It wasn't nothing. I began to reach out, not for funding or advice, but for honesty. I told friends, mentors, even strangers, we shut it down, it didn't work. Instead of judgment, I got empathy. People said, that must have been hard. Others shared their own failures. One fellow founder said, trying and failing is part of this game. You're braver than most. Those words didn't erase the sting, but they gave me a new lens. This wasn't a verdict on my worth, it was a chapter in a longer story. I started freelancing, building small tools, helping other startups launch MVPs. I stopped trying to be a visionary overnight and focused on making tangible things. I rediscovered joy in solving real problems without the crushing pressure to change the world. I worked with scrappy founders who still had fire in their eyes. Sometimes I warned them of the pitfalls I'd fallen into. Sometimes I just listened. Everyone burns their own way. Now, a couple years later, I can say this with clarity. Being a startup founder sucks. It's isolating, brutal, and often ends in heartbreak. It demands everything. Time, money, relationships, sanity, and offers no guarantees. It asks you to live in perpetual uncertainty, juggling fragile egos, toxic optimism, and relentless deadlines. But I'm not sorry I did it. I'm sorry it didn't work. But I'm not sorry I tried. I learned more about myself in those 2 years than in any other part of my life. I learned what resilience really means, what humility feels like, what it means to keep going when there's no applause. I probably won't found another startup anytime soon, not because I'm defeated, but because I'm older, wiser. I don't need to be a founder to feel fulfilled. I don't need VC validation to feel worthy. These days I build quietly. I prioritize my peace. I nurture relationships. I sleep more. I breathe more. And sometimes when I'm brave, I open the old codebase, not to resurrect a dream but to honor the version of me who dared to chase it. That kid deserved better, but he also gave me everything.